"You are not an owner," the CEO said, leaving the single father's yellow envelope unopened beside his cardboard box. By the time HR escorted him out, the board secretary was reaching for a sealed founder file. Ethan Mercer stood on the 18th floor operations floor of Hartwell Meridian, with a worn navy jacket over his arm, a termination notice in one hand, and a cardboard box pressed against his ribs. Inside were a coffee mug, a phone charger, and a school photo of his 9-year-old daughter Lily, smiling with both front teeth missing. Behind the glass walls, employees had stopped pretending to work. Marissa Vale, the chief executive officer, looked at the yellow envelope beside the box as if it had soiled the table. "Your ownership fantasy is over," she said. HR Director Paul Brenner held the conference room door open. Security waited near the badge reader. Ethan did not argue. He laid Lily's photo flat against the bottom of the box, asked for a copy of the termination record, and walked past the rows of silent desks. The elevator carried him down 22 floors of a building his father had helped create. In the lobby, Ethan set the cardboard box on a bench beside the security desk. Then he took an old founder card from his wallet, dialed the direct boardroom line, and waited through 2 rings. When Evelyn Shaw answered upstairs, Ethan gave his name. Then he said, "Seal the boardroom." On the 22nd floor, the board secretary's hand stopped above her notes. Around the long table, directors were preparing to vote on the sale of a division worth millions. Marissa Vale was already on her way up to finish it. Evelyn closed the folder in front of her. What had HR just escorted out of the building? Ethan Mercer was 42 years old, and most mornings began before the city did. At 5:18, the alarm on his phone vibrated on the milk crate he used as a nightstand. He turned it off before the second buzz because Lily slept across the narrow hallway, and her asthma was always worse after a hard night. Their apartment in Cicero was small enough that the kitchen light reached the front door. Ethan packed Lily's lunch under that light with the same care he gave an audit file. Turkey sandwich cut in half, apple slices in a plastic container, a folded napkin with one sentence written in blue pen. Sometimes it said, "You remembered your spelling words." Sometimes it said, "Dad is proud of you." The inhaler stayed in the top drawer beside overdue bills, school forms, and a photo of Grace Mercer from the summer before she got sick. Grace had died 3 years earlier, after 8 months of appointments, insurance calls, and hospital corridors where people lowered their voices before saying numbers Ethan could not afford. Since then, Ethan had learned how to braid hair, badly, how to stretch a grocery list, and how to answer a child's question when the honest answer would break both of them. He never missed pickup. That rule governed everything else. He took earlier trains. He ate lunch at his desk. He turned down after-hours drinks with people who already treated him as invisible. At 3:10, he was outside Lily's school, unless a director had trapped him in a meeting. Even then, Mrs. Alvarez from downstairs had a key and a list of Lily's medications taped to the refrigerator. At Hartwell Meridian, Ethan's badge said Compliance Analyst, until a restructuring 18 months earlier changed the directory to Records Associate. No one explained the downgrade in writing. No one changed his duties. He still reviewed vendor contracts for missing approvals. He still checked access logs when restricted files opened without the right authorization. He still compared archived shareholder documents to board packets before major votes. If a hospital supply contract referenced a routing guarantee the software team could not meet, Ethan found it. If a freight vendor had been paid through the wrong subsidiary, Ethan found that too. He had a habit of correcting people gently. A junior paralegal once attached the wrong amendment to a packet for the audit committee. Ethan walked to her desk with the corrected copy, laid it face down beside her keyboard, and said, "This one will save you a call from legal." He did not tell her manager. He did not copy HR. The next morning, there was a paper cup of coffee beside his monitor with no note. That was how he preferred things. Ethan's father, Thomas Mercer, had been one of Hartwell Meridian's original founders. Most employees did not know that. The lobby screen showed Marissa Vale shaking hands with clients, standing under conference banners, and cutting ribbons at warehouse automation centers. Older company photos had been moved to an archive room on the 12th floor, where the air was cold and the file cabinets still used metal keys. Thomas Mercer had never liked display. In the one framed picture Ethan kept at home, his father stood behind a folding table in a rented office, sleeves rolled up, coffee stain on his tie, arguing over a paper map of regional freight lanes. Thomas had believed the company should protect supply chains that ordinary people depended on: hospitals, community clinics, small manufacturers that could not survive delayed parts. When Thomas died, Ethan was 29, newly married, and too busy caring for Grace's first pregnancy to understand every folder his father left behind. There had been documents, signature pages, a letter in Thomas's careful handwriting telling Ethan that some responsibilities did not feel important until someone tried to erase them. Years passed. Ethan worked. Lily was born. Grace died. Hartwell Meridian grew large enough to forget the people who had built it. Then Ethan began seeing references that did not match. The first one appeared in a board packet about a proposed sale of Hartwell Meridian's Midwest Clinical Logistics Division. The packet mentioned founder protections previously reviewed, but no founder protection document was attached. Ethan requested the archived file through the normal records system. The request disappeared after 2 days. He submitted it again. The second request returned with a note from General Counsel Trevor Ladd's office. Historical. No current relevance. Ethan printed the response and placed it in a yellow envelope. The third time, he asked corporate records to log the missing appendix formally before the board vote. He included copies of the packet reference, the old founder card from his father's files, and a page from Thomas Mercer's estate documents naming Ethan as successor to any retained voting rights. That request went unanswered for 6 business days. On the 7th, Paul Brenner from HR called him to a meeting. By then, the yellow envelope had become heavier than paper. Ethan carried it in his work bag beside Lily's permission slip for a school museum trip and a grocery list written on the back of a utility bill. He knew what people saw when they looked at him. A tired man in the same navy jacket. A single father checking his phone at 2:45 because school dismissal was coming. A records employee who did not speak unless the record required it. He let them think that, because the work mattered more than the room's opinion. But the envelope stayed with him. Hartwell Meridian occupied the upper half of a glass tower near the Chicago River. From the street, the company looked like every polished promise in corporate America. Silver letters above revolving doors, security guards with earpieces, a lobby wall showing moving lines of freight, medical kits, and warehouse routes across a digital map of the United States. The public story was simple. Hartwell Meridian helped hospitals, clinics, and regional suppliers move critical goods quickly. Its routing software predicted delays, balanced warehouse loads, and found alternate freight paths when storms or labor shortages disrupted normal schedules. Inside the company, the story was less clean. The executive floor valued polish above memory. Newer vice presidents spoke in the language of acquisitions, consolidation, and liquidity events. They knew which consulting firms impressed the board. They knew which restaurants Marissa Vale used for client dinners. They knew which employees could be interrupted without apology. Marissa had become CEO after 2 aggressive acquisitions and 1 sudden retirement. She was 50, precise, and rarely raised her voice because cold politeness could be more frightening. Her suits were pale gray or white. Her office had no personal photographs. On the wall behind her desk, a framed magazine profile called her the woman who modernized logistics. She liked that word, modernized. To Marissa, old founder agreements were sentimental debris. The company had moved beyond the rented office, the folding table, the men with coffee-stained ties. She treated anything that limited executive discretion as an insult from the past. Trevor Ladd, the general counsel, understood what she wanted before she said it. He was a narrow man with silver glasses and a habit of placing one finger on any document he wished to control. In meetings, he used soft phrases that sounded reasonable and landed like locked doors. No business need. Outside the scope. Historical only. Dana Klein, the chief financial officer, saw the Midwest Clinical Logistics Division as a number trapped inside an old promise. A private buyer had offered a rich price for it, but the buyer wanted freedom to close 2 smaller routing centers and absorb the hospital contracts into a cheaper network. Dana's spreadsheets called that efficiency. Ethan's compliance notes called it a service risk. Paul Brenner in HR did not control strategy or law or finance. He controlled fear. He knew how to turn an executive's irritation into a performance memo. He knew how to label a question as disruption. He knew how to write a termination notice that made the person being removed look unstable before anyone heard what he had raised. Together, they formed a system that looked official from the outside. Ethan had watched it work before. A contract manager named Isabel Ruiz questioned why a vendor with late deliveries kept receiving premium status. 2 weeks later, her review described her as resistant to leadership direction. A warehouse integration specialist named Mark Ellison flagged missing safety certifications in a board appendix. He was moved to a role without direct access to executive materials. A finance analyst named Priya Nair asked why a projected sale bonus had been excluded from a conflict disclosure. She resigned after 3 closed-door meetings with HR. Each departure was treated as individual. Ethan saw the pattern in the files. He did not make speeches about it. He collected dates. He saved packet versions. He compared document numbers. On his lunch break, he walked to the archive room and checked which folders had been requested and by whom. If he saw a mismatch, he wrote it in a notebook he kept inside a plain black binder. On a Tuesday in March, he found a reference to founder file HM01 in a board index, but the attachment list jumped from HM00 to HM02. He assumed it was an error. On Thursday, the same file was missing from a finance packet. On Friday, Trevor Ladd's office requested access to the sealed archive ledger and marked the request privileged. Ethan knew enough to be careful. He asked corporate records whether the founder file had been reviewed by the board secretary. The records clerk lowered her voice and said, "I was told not to route that question." "By whom?" Ethan asked. She looked toward the ceiling, as if the executive floor could hear through concrete. That afternoon, Ethan submitted a formal document integrity request. The system assigned it number DIR-4471. By Monday morning, the request had been rerouted to HR for behavioral review. Paul Brenner appeared beside Ethan's desk at 9:12 with his tablet in hand. "There are concerns about your tone," he said. Ethan looked up from a vendor audit. "My tone in what document?" "In repeated inquiries outside your role." "My role includes board packet integrity." Paul gave a thin smile. "Your current title is Records Associate." Ethan did not answer immediately. The title change had appeared after the restructuring. His paycheck had stayed the same. His assignments had stayed the same. Only the label had moved downward, like a chair being pulled away before a man sat. "I am still assigned compliance review," Ethan said. "For now," Paul replied. After that, small things changed. Ethan's name disappeared from 2 email chains. A meeting invite about the division's sale was canceled without explanation. When he entered the 18th floor break room, 2 managers stopped talking. One of them glanced at his jacket and said, low enough to pretend it was private, "Founder family, apparently." The other one laughed. Ethan filled his coffee mug, tightened the lid, and went back to his desk. The yellow envelope sat in his drawer. On the front, in block letters, he had written, "Board Secretary Review Requested." Inside were copies of the missing board references, Thomas Mercer's succession page, the founder card, and Ethan's unanswered document requests. He did not know whether the sealed file would prove what his father's letter suggested. He knew the board was about to vote without seeing documents its own packet referenced. That was enough. The direct collision came on a Friday morning when the sale vote was scheduled for 1:30. At 7:43, Ethan was already at his desk. Lily had woken coughing at 4:20, and he had sat beside her bed until the inhaler worked. Then he packed her lunch, signed the museum trip form, and caught the 6:31 train with the yellow envelope inside his bag. By 8:15, the operations floor was filling. The glass offices along the east wall caught the pale sun. Assistants carried coffee trays. Managers gathered in pairs, their voices careful because Marissa Vale was expected upstairs before the board meeting. Ethan opened the latest board packet and checked the attachment index. The founder voting rights appendix was still missing. He sent one final message to corporate records, copying the board secretary's general inbox. "Please log attached materials for board secretary review before today's division sale vote. The packet references founder protections without including the governing file." At 9:06, the email bounced from the board secretary's general inbox with an administrative restriction. At 9:18, Trevor Ladd's assistant wrote back, "Do not send further materials on this subject. Council has determined no current relevance." At 10:02, Paul Brenner appeared again. "Ethan," he said, loud enough for nearby desks to hear, "Conference Room C." Ethan saved his screen, picked up the yellow envelope, and followed him. Conference Room C had glass walls on 3 sides. It was meant for collaboration, which meant humiliation inside it traveled quickly. Marissa Vale sat at the head of the table. Trevor Ladd sat to her right, silver glasses folded beside his legal pad. Dana Klein had a spreadsheet open on her laptop. Paul took the chair closest to the door. No one offered Ethan a seat. He remained standing and placed the yellow envelope on the table. "I am asking that this be logged with the board secretary before the afternoon vote," he said. The sale materials are missing a referenced founder appendix. Marissa looked at the envelope but did not touch it. You have been told to stop. I have been told it is not relevant, Ethan said. The packet says otherwise. Trevor placed one finger on the envelope and pushed it back toward Ethan without opening it. These are irrelevant family papers. They are corporate governance records. Dana gave a short breath through her nose. You are holding up a sale reviewed by finance, legal, and the executive committee. I am asking for the board to see the documents referenced in its own packet. Marissa leaned back. No, Mr. Mercer. You are using your last name to create a fantasy of importance. Through the glass, Ethan saw two managers slow near the hallway. Behind them, a project lead stood with a folder held against her chest. They were watching without appearing to watch. Paul slid a printed notice across the table. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. The paper stopped near Ethan's hand. He looked down and read the first line. Termination for insubordination, disruption of executive process, and misuse of confidential archives. The room became very quiet. Marissa stood. Your badge is being deactivated now. You will be escorted to your desk to collect personal items. You will not speak to staff. You will not access company systems. The board will not be delayed by a single father who needs attention. That sentence carried through the glass. A woman at the nearest workstation looked down at her keyboard. A man beside the printer stopped with one sheet still in his hand. Someone at the back whispered, then stopped when Paul opened the door. Ethan folded the termination notice once and put it under his palm. I would like a copy of the termination record, he said. Paul blinked. You are holding it. With the attachments and approval trail. Trevor's jaw moved slightly. You are no longer authorized to request records. I made the request before termination. Marissa gave a small laugh. This is exactly why we are done here. Security arrived at 10:21. The guard was not cruel. His name was Dennis, and he had once helped Ethan carry archived binders to the elevator when a cartwheel broke. Dennis looked at the termination notice, then at Ethan, and his expression changed with embarrassment. Mr. Mercer, he said quietly, I have to walk with you. I understand, Ethan said. The walk from conference room C to Ethan's desk was 38 steps. He counted them because it gave his mind something steady to hold. By step 12, the operations floor had gone almost silent. By step 20, a senior manager had closed her office door without taking her eyes off him. By step 38, someone from HR had placed a flat cardboard box on his chair. Paul stood beside the desk with his tablet. Personal items only. Ethan took the coffee mug Lily had painted with crooked blue stars. He unplugged the phone charger. From the bottom drawer, he removed a spare inhaler, checked the label, then placed it in his jacket pocket instead of the box. Last, he took Lily's school photo from beneath the monitor. The yellow envelope was still in his hand. Paul reached for it. Company materials stay. Ethan held it lightly. These are copies of requests and family estate documents. Trevor had followed them out. The envelope contains references to confidential archives. Then log it, Ethan said. Marissa stood near the glass doors of her temporary 18th floor office. No one is logging anything from you. Ethan looked at her for the first time since the notice had been handed across the table. "You are refusing to transmit it to the board secretary?" "I am refusing to indulge this ownership performance." He nodded once, as if confirming a date on a file. Then he placed the yellow envelope on top of the cardboard box, lifted the box with both hands, and walked toward the elevators. No one spoke. At the elevator bank, Lily's photo slid against the side of the box. Ethan moved one hand to keep it from bending. He did not look back. He did not ask the watching employees to defend him. He did not remind Marissa that his father's name was in older incorporation records. He did not say what the founder card in his wallet allowed him to do. The elevator doors opened. Paul stepped in beside him, tablet held tight to his chest. Dennis stood behind them. Trevor remained on the floor, already looking at his phone. As the doors closed, Ethan heard Marissa's voice. "Make sure his access is dead before he reaches the lobby." The lobby was bright enough to feel unreal. At 10:34, Ethan Mercer stepped out past the security gates, with his badge already disabled and the cardboard box in his arms. The yellow envelope lay on top, unopened. Employees from other companies crossed the marble floor with visitor stickers and coffee cups, unaware that a board vote upstairs had just been placed on a path none of the executives could control. Dennis walked him to the security desk. "I am sorry," he said under his breath. "You did your job," Ethan answered. That was all. He set the box on the bench beside the desk. For a moment, he rested both hands on the cardboard edges. The coffee mug clicked softly against the phone charger. Lily's photo looked up from the bottom of the box, her smile caught in a school photographer's blue background. Ethan took out his wallet. Behind his transit card and health insurance card was a cream-colored card with softened corners. Thomas Mercer had given it to him the year before he died, during a lunch in a diner near Union Station. Ethan remembered his father pushing it across the table with 2 fingers. "If a room ever closes against the company's own documents," Thomas had said, "this opens the right one." At the time, Ethan had thought it sounded dramatic. Thomas often spoke as if the future were a contract someone might try to misread. Now Ethan turned the card over. There was no logo on the back, only a direct number and a short verification phrase printed in small black type. He dialed. On the 22nd floor, Evelyn Shaw was placing fresh copies of the sale resolution in front of the directors. Evelyn was 63, with close-cropped silver hair and a habit of dating every page she touched. She had served 3 board chairs, 5 chief executives, and enough emergency meetings to know that the dangerous ones usually began politely. The boardroom table was long enough to make distance look like order. Marissa's seat near the end was still empty. Dana Klein was present with her finance binder. Trevor Ladd stood near the wall, speaking quietly to an outside transaction lawyer. The directors had been told the vote would be clean, efficient, and final. The direct line on Evelyn's console rang twice. Few people had that number. She answered with her name. Ethan gave his. Evelyn's pen paused. Then he gave the verification phrase from the founder card. For 3 seconds, she did not speak. Her eyes moved to the sealed file index on the side table, where certain old procedures were listed in a binder most executives had never opened. "Repeat the command," Evelyn said. "Seal the boardroom." The words did not sound dramatic in Ethan's voice. They sounded tired and exact. Evelyn turned one page in the procedure binder. Her finger found the line attached to disputed founder control documents. Then she stood so quickly that the director nearest her stopped reading. "This meeting is paused," she said. Dana looked up. "For what reason?" Evelyn did not answer her. She pressed the internal security key on the console. "This is Evelyn Shaw, board secretary. Secure the 22nd floor executive conference suite. No director, officer, or transaction representative leaves until I clear the seal." Trevor stepped away from the wall. "Evelyn, that is unnecessary." She looked at him over her glasses. "Counsel, please sit down." The room changed. The outside lawyer closed his folder. One director removed his reading glasses. Another looked toward the empty seat where Marissa was supposed to sit. Dana's hand hovered above her laptop, then withdrew. Evelyn called Records Control. "Retrieve sealed founder file HM01, two-signature protocol. Bring the access ledger." On the lobby bench, Ethan heard none of that. He only heard Evelyn come back to the line. "Mr. Mercer," she said more quietly, "where are you now?" "Lobby security desk." "Do not leave the building." "I was instructed to leave." "You are now instructed by the board secretary to remain available." Ethan looked at the cardboard box, then at Dennis, who had heard only Ethan's half of the call. "Understood," Ethan said. Upstairs, Marissa stepped out of the private elevator at 1041 and found a security officer standing outside the boardroom doors. "I have a vote in progress," she said. "The meeting is sealed," the officer answered. Marissa's expression sharpened. "By whose authority?" The door opened before he could answer. Evelyn stood inside with the procedure binder in one hand. "By the authority attached to a disputed founder control file," she said. "Please enter and take your seat." For the first time that morning, Marissa Vale did not have the room arranged around her certainty. The first evidence trail was paper, timestamps, and the stubborn memory of systems people had assumed no one would compare. At 10:49, the assistant corporate secretary, Jordan Pike, entered the records vault with the senior records custodian. The vault was on the 16th floor, behind two badge doors and a camera that stored footage for 7 years. The sealed founder cabinet required 2 physical keys kept in separate envelopes. One belonged to the board secretary's office. The other belonged to records control. Jordan signed first. The custodian signed second. The cabinet opened with a metallic sound that seemed too small for what it meant. Inside, sealed file HM01 was stored in a gray archival box with a red band around it. The label had faded at the edges, but the file number was clear. Hartwell Meridian, Founding Governance, Original Bylaws, Voting Rights Appendix, Succession Memorandum. Jordan placed the box on a cart, added the access ledger, and wrote the time. 10:56. The camera above the vault door recorded the whole movement. In the boardroom, Evelyn began with the digital records triggered by Ethan's call. Once a founder control dispute was invoked, Hartwell Meridian's governance system automatically placed related packet files under legal hold. The hold froze the sale materials, the attachment history, the file request logs, and any HR actions involving the person who invoked the dispute within the previous 90 days. Trevor Ladd knew that. His face showed it before his voice did. "This is a misuse of an obsolete procedure," he said. Evelyn looked down at the binder. The board will decide current relevance after reviewing the sealed file. Marissa sat very still. Who invoked it? Evelyn did not answer immediately. That pause was enough. Dana turned toward Trevor. Paul Brenner, called upstairs at Evelyn's instruction, entered the room carrying the same tablet he had used beside Ethan's desk. He looked confused until he saw Trevor's face. Then he looked afraid. Evelyn placed the first printed log on the table. 3 document integrity requests were submitted by Ethan Mercer. The first was removed from queue without board secretary review. The second was denied by counsel as historical. The third was restricted administratively this morning. Marissa's jaw tightened. Mr. Mercer was terminated for workplace disruption. At what time? A director asked. Paul looked at his tablet. The meeting began at 10:17. The termination was effective at 10:20. Evelyn turned another page. His final request to log the founder materials was sent at 8:15 and administratively blocked at 9:06. The room held that sequence. Request, block, termination. Trevor adjusted his glasses. The employee had no authority to inject family papers into a board transaction. Evelyn looked toward the door as Jordan Pike entered with the archival box. That is what this file will establish or disprove. No one moved while the box crossed the room. The file index was attached to the top under a clear sleeve. Evelyn read it first in silence. Her expression did not change, but one director saw her left hand press the paper flat, as if the page might otherwise lift from the table. Original bylaws, special founder class, voting rights appendix, anti-stripping protection, Thomas Mercer succession designation, Ethan Mercer acceptance document, board control memorandum, sealed room procedure. Dana's face lost color at the 4th entry. Trevor looked at the index, then at Marissa. It was a quick glance, but Evelyn saw it. So did 2 directors. Before she opened the file, Evelyn requested Ethan be escorted back to the 22nd floor. Bring his box, she added. Paul objected before he could stop himself. His personal items are not relevant. Evelyn turned toward him. Mr. Brenner, at this point his personal items are part of the record of how he was removed. That sentence reached the lobby through a security call. Dennis looked at Ethan with a new expression, one that had moved beyond apology. They need you upstairs. Ethan picked up the cardboard box. The yellow envelope was still on top. The elevator ride back to the 22nd floor felt longer than the ride down. Ethan stood beside Dennis and watched the numbers change. His phone vibrated once. It was a message from Mrs. Alvarez. Lily is fine. Pick up covered if you are late. He typed with one thumb. Thank you. I may be late. Then he put the phone away. When the elevator doors opened, the executive corridor was lined with glass and pale wood. People who had ignored Ethan for years now looked at the box first, then at his face. The same worn jacket, the same tired eyes, the same man they had watched leave. Only the room had changed. Evelyn met him outside the boardroom. Her voice was low. Mr. Mercer, the board is reviewing a file that may concern your voting authority. You will be present. You do not need to answer until asked. Ethan nodded. Do you understand what the seal means? My father explained enough. She looked at the yellow envelope. Did anyone open it? No. Evelyn's mouth tightened. Bring it in. The boardroom doors opened. Marissa Vale was seated near the head of the table, but the head no longer belonged to her. Trevor had a legal pad in front of him with nothing written on it. Dana's laptop was closed. Paul sat against the wall, tablet dark on his lap. Ethan entered with the cardboard box in both hands. No one laughed. Evelyn placed a chair at the side of the table, not against the wall. Ethan set the box on the floor beside it. Lily's photo faced upward. The sealed founder file lay unopened at the center of the table. Evelyn broke the red band in full view of the board. The first document was the original bylaws, signed 22 years earlier by Thomas Mercer, Alan Hartwell, and 2 early investors. The pages were yellowed at the edges, but the signatures were dark. The second document created a special founder class of voting shares, retained by Thomas Mercer, with authority over any transaction that would sell, dissolve, or materially strip a protected operating division. Evelyn read the purpose clause aloud. The clause was written in plain language. Hartwell Meridian would not sell critical logistics assets if doing so endangered continuity of service to medical, public health, or regional freight clients without review by the founder vote. One director leaned forward. Dana looked down at her closed laptop. The third document was the voting rights appendix missing from the sale packet. It stated that the founder class did not carry ordinary economic control. It did not make its holder richer than other shareholders by default. It existed for specified decisions, including sale of protected divisions, merger removing founder protections, or executive action suppressing board access to governing documents. Ethan had not mentioned money. The document did not speak of money first either. The fourth document was Thomas Mercer's succession designation. It named Ethan Daniel Mercer as successor holder of the founder class upon Thomas's death, provided Ethan accepted the obligations in writing and maintained conflict disclosures with the company. Evelyn turned to the fifth document. The room seemed to draw inward. It was an acceptance form dated years earlier, signed by Ethan Mercer in blue ink, witnessed by the then board secretary, and recorded in the corporate minute book. Attached to it was an annual disclosure certification from Ethan, renewed through the previous year. The most recent renewal had been logged in corporate records, then marked inactive after the restructuring that changed his title. Evelyn looked at the access ledger. Marked inactive by whose office? Asked a director named Samuel Ortiz. Jordan Pike checked the log. General Counsel's administrative account. Trevor's voice was tight. That would have been part of a cleanup of outdated permissions. Ethan looked at him for the first time. He did not speak. Evelyn continued. The sixth document was the Board Control Memorandum. It explained the sealed room procedure Ethan had invoked. If the founder vote was disputed, suppressed, or excluded from materials involving a protected transaction, any verified successor holder could command the boardroom sealed until the original file was reviewed by the board secretary in the presence of directors. Evelyn read the line slowly. If such command is verified, no sale, merger, removal of founder protection, or related executive action shall proceed until the sealed file is opened and the voting authority determined. Marissa's hand closed around the arm of her chair. Evelyn placed the page flat. The command was verified at 10:39 this morning, she said. The sealed file identifies Ethan Mercer as the controlling holder of the founder vote. The proposed division sale cannot proceed without his deciding vote. The room went still. Ethan sat with both hands folded on the table. His cardboard box rested beside his shoes. The yellow envelope remained unopened, not because it did not matter, but because the file Marissa had tried to avoid had said enough. Samuel Ortiz turned to Ethan. "Mr. Mercer, did you attempt to submit materials related to this file before today?" "Yes," Ethan said. "How many times?" "3 formal requests. 1 final packet message this morning." "Were you told those materials would be provided to the board secretary?" "No." "Were you terminated after asking that they be logged before this vote?" "Yes." Paul Brenner shifted in his chair. The tablet on his lap reflected the ceiling lights. Marissa found her voice. "This is being framed unfairly. Mr. Mercer was removed for insubordination and misuse of archives. No one knew he held any current authority." Evelyn looked at the file request logs. Counsel's office requested sealed file HM01 twice in the last 6 months. Trevor sat back. A director at the far end of the table spoke for the first time. "Mr. Ladd?" Trevor cleared his throat. "Preliminary review only. Did you disclose the existence of this file to the board during sale preparation?" "I did not believe it controlled the transaction." Evelyn lifted the missing appendix. "Then why was the voting rights appendix referenced in packet drafts and removed from the final materials?" Dana opened her mouth, then closed it. The quality of the silence changed. At first, it had been shock. Now it was recognition. The board was no longer asking whether Ethan Mercer had imagined authority. It was asking who had tried to keep the board from seeing it. Evelyn opened the packet history. Draft 1 included a placeholder for founder protections. Draft 2 included the voting rights appendix in the attachment list. Draft 3 removed the appendix but left a sentence saying founder protections had been reviewed. Draft 4 sent to directors contained no attachment and no explanation. The edit trail showed finance, legal, and executive office revisions. Dana spoke carefully. The sale model assumed no active founder objection. "Did anyone ask the founder holder?" Samuel Ortiz asked. Dana looked at Ethan, then away. "No." Marissa's voice hardened. "Because we did not recognize one." Ethan finally spoke without being asked. His tone was the same one he used when correcting a contract error for a junior employee. That was not the main problem. All eyes turned to him. He looked at Marissa, then at Paul, Trevor, and Dana. "The problem was not that you did not know who held the vote. The problem was what you were willing to do to someone you thought did not." No one answered. Evelyn let the sentence sit in the room. Then she returned to the record. Paul's HR file showed Ethan's title change had been entered 6 days after his first question about the founder ledger months earlier. The explanation field said, "Realignment." There was no supervisor approval attached. Ethan's performance reviews before the change described him as meticulous, reliable, and trusted with sensitive governance records. After the change, Paul's office opened a behavioral note describing him as overly attached to legacy processes. The note had no examples. Another log showed that Ethan's access to certain board packet archives was narrowed after he asked why the founder appendix was missing. A third showed that the termination notice had been drafted at 9:42 that morning, 35 minutes before the conference room meeting, and less than an hour after his final message requesting board secretary review. Marissa had not fired him because he disrupted the board. She fired him before the board could hear him. That distinction mattered. Evelyn closed the founder file gently, but not completely. The founder vote remains active. Mr. Mercer controls the deciding vote on the proposed division sale. The termination of Mr. Mercer, issued after repeated requests to submit ownership and governance documents, appears connected to a board document dispute. The sale vote cannot proceed today. The outside transaction lawyer began gathering his papers. Marissa turned sharply. No one leaves. Evelyn met her eyes. The boardroom is sealed against suppression of the founder file. It is not sealed to protect the sale. Samuel Ortiz stood. The vote is withdrawn pending review. Another director seconded it. No one opposed. The motion passed by voice, but it did not sound like victory. It sounded like a room realizing how close it had come to signing away both a division and its own oversight. Ethan looked down at Lily's photo in the box. Her smile was tilted because one pigtail had come loose before picture time. He thought of the inhaler in his jacket pocket, the school pickup he would miss, and the sandwich in her lunchbox with the note folded beside it. For 3 years his life had been measured in things that could not be dropped. Medication, rent, school forms, work records, promises made to a dead wife and a living child. He had not carried the founder vote like a crown. He had carried it like a responsibility. Now the board could see the difference. Accountability began with procedure, not shouting. Evelyn recorded the withdrawal of the sale vote at 11:38. Then she asked Ethan to step into the adjoining conference room while the independent directors discussed immediate action. He picked up the cardboard box automatically. Samuel Ortiz stopped him. Mr. Mercer, you may leave the box here if you prefer. Ethan looked at it. I have carried it this far. No one smiled. In the adjoining room, Dennis from security stood near the door, uncertain whether he was guarding Ethan or protecting him. Ethan set the box on a side table. The coffee mug had tipped over, but it had not cracked. The yellow envelope was still sealed. He called Mrs. Alvarez and explained only that a work matter had run long. She said Lily was doing homework at her kitchen table and had already eaten the snack Ethan left in the fridge. Is everything okay? Mrs. Alvarez asked. Ethan looked through the glass partition at the boardroom, where the people who had fired him were now answering questions under the same lights. It is being corrected, he said. At 12:12, Evelyn came to get him. When Ethan returned, Marissa was no longer at the head of the table. She sat along the side, hands clasped tightly. Trevor had removed his glasses and placed them beside the legal pad. Dana's finance binder was closed with a red review tag on top. Paul Brenner stared straight ahead. Samuel Ortiz spoke for the independent directors. Effective immediately, Marissa Vale is suspended from her duties as Chief Executive Officer, pending an independent investigation. Trevor Ladd, Dana Klein, and Paul Brenner are also suspended from decision authority related to governance records, transaction materials, personnel actions, and the proposed division sale. Marissa's face hardened. This is an overreaction to a procedural ambiguity. Evelyn placed the access logs beside the founder file. The ambiguity ended when the sealed file was opened. Trevor tried a different path. There may have been confusion about legacy documents. Evelyn turned to the packet history. The appendix was included in drafts and removed before the final board packet. Dana said quietly, "We were under time pressure." A director answered, Time pressure does not remove voting rights. Paul Brenner finally spoke. HR acted on executive direction. Ethan looked at him then. Paul's voice had lost the practiced smoothness it carried on the operations floor. He sounded like a man trying to step backward from a notice he had signed. Samuel continued. Mr. Mercer's termination is rescinded on the record. HR will correct the personnel file by close of business. His badge and system access will be restored under board supervision. Any record describing his conduct today as insubordinate or disruptive will be preserved for investigation, but removed from active employment status. Paul nodded too quickly. Ethan did not. He asked one question. Will the employees who raised similar concerns be reviewed? The boardroom paused again, but this time the pause did not resist him. Ethan continued. Isabel Ruiz, Mark Ellison, Priya Nair. There are others. Some may not want to come back. Some may only want their records corrected. But if the same offices reviewed them after they raised document or reporting concerns, that should be part of the investigation. Marissa looked toward the window. Samuel wrote the names down. Include prior retaliation review in the outside firm's scope. Ethan sat back. That was the point at which Marissa seemed to understand that he was not going to ask for her to be embarrassed in the lobby. He was not going to demand she carry a box past the staff. He was not going to repeat her sentence about a single father needing attention. He wanted the record corrected. For people like him, the record mattered. A false termination notice could follow a person from one job application to the next. A performance review written in retaliation could cost a raise, a promotion, a mortgage application, a sense of standing at home. Executives could call it documentation. Workers lived under it. At 12:46, Dennis escorted Ethan back to the lobby with Evelyn and a board assistant. The cardboard box was still in Ethan's hands. The security desk was the same. The bench was the same. But the people behind it stood a little straighter when Evelyn approached. Restore Mr. Mercer's building badge, she said. Board authority. The security supervisor typed into the system. Ethan's badge, which had gone dead less than 3 hours earlier, flashed green on the reader. The small light mattered. Employees from Hartwell Meridian had begun to gather at the balcony above the lobby and near the elevators. Word had moved through the building faster than any official statement. They did not know every detail. They knew Ethan had been fired with a box. They knew the boardroom had been sealed. They knew Marissa Vale had not come back down. Evelyn handed Ethan the corrected access slip. Your system access will be restored in stages under review. You are not required to return to your desk today. Ethan looked toward the elevators. Paul Brenner had told him not to speak to staff. That order no longer held. Still, Ethan did not make a speech. He only lifted the box slightly and said to Dennis, "Thank you for treating me decently." Dennis swallowed. "Yes, sir." The words traveled farther than Ethan intended. On the 18th floor, the desk where Ethan had packed under HR supervision remained empty until 2:03. Then a board assistant placed a notice on it, stating that all records related to document integrity requests, founder file access, the division sale, and Ethan Mercer's termination were under independent legal hold. People read it in silence. The company did not change in one afternoon. No company does. But fear changed shape when the people who had used it were made to answer for dates, signatures, and missing pages. The independent investigation began the following Monday. The outside firm arrived with laptops, sealed evidence bags, and interview schedules. They did not report to Marissa, Trevor, Dana, or Paul. They reported to a committee of independent directors and the board secretary. The first week focused on access logs. Trevor Ladd's office had requested the sealed founder file twice, once shortly after sale discussions began, and once after Ethan's first document integrity request. Neither request had been disclosed to the board. Notes attached to the second request included the phrase "successor issue, possible complication." That phrase ended any claim that the file had been forgotten. The second week focused on board packets. Dana Klein's finance team had removed the voting rights appendix from the final sale materials after an internal message warned that including it could slow buyer confidence. The finance team did not create the legal risk alone, but it had helped hide the document that revealed it. The third week focused on HR. Paul Brenner's files showed a pattern that stretched beyond Ethan. Employees who questioned executive reporting were described with the same small set of phrases: not aligned, resistant, poor judgment, disruptive communication. In several files, praise from direct supervisors vanished between draft and final review. Isabel Ruiz received a corrected review and back pay for a bonus she had lost. Mark Ellison was offered reinstatement to a technical role with independent reporting access. Priya Nair, who had already taken work elsewhere, declined to return but accepted a written correction, stating that her resignation followed a protected finance concern, not performance problems. There were others. Some wanted money. Some wanted apologies. Some wanted nothing except a clean file and the knowledge that the company had finally admitted what happened. Ethan read those findings from a temporary office 2 doors down from the board secretary. The sign outside said Interim Director of Governance Review. He had not asked for the title. The board offered it because someone had to rebuild the processes that had been twisted around him, and Ethan understood the damage from the inside. He accepted on 2 conditions. First, governance records would no longer be filtered through executives whose transactions they might limit. Second, employees raising records, finance, legal, or HR retaliation concerns would have a board-level reporting channel that could not be rerouted back to the people named in the complaint. Samuel Ortiz agreed. Evelyn Shaw built the procedure with him. The new channel required a tracking number, a board secretary review field, and an automatic notice if a complaint touched transaction materials or governing documents. HR could not terminate, demote, or reassign an employee involved in such a dispute without independent review. On the 18th floor, some managers learned to speak more carefully. Others learned to listen. The change was uneven at first. People who had survived by staying quiet did not trust a new form simply because it had a board logo. Ethan knew that. Trust had to be earned in small, visible acts. So he made the acts visible. When a junior analyst flagged a missing vendor certification, her concern was logged and resolved without a performance note. When a warehouse software lead questioned a service risk assumption, he was invited to the review meeting instead of being removed from the email chain. When corporate records received a request for archived governing materials, the system showed who reviewed it and when. The board packets changed too. Each packet now included a certification page stating that all governing documents, voting rights attachments, and transaction limitations referenced in the materials were included or specifically explained. The certification required signatures from legal, finance, the board secretary, and the business lead. No one could remove an appendix quietly and call it clutter. Evelyn also held training for department heads. She stood at the front of a conference room with the sealed file procedure projected behind her and said, "A company that treats records as obstacles will eventually become an obstacle to itself." Ethan sat near the back that day. His navy jacket hung on the chair beside him. Several people turned to see how he reacted. He wrote one note in his binder. Good procedure protects people before power has to be embarrassed. The division's sale did not proceed. After review, the board determined that the buyer's plan would have closed 2 routing centers serving rural hospitals and reduced emergency freight capacity in 3 states. Hartwell Meridian kept the division, replaced 2 senior transaction advisors, and ordered a service risk study before any future proposal. The founder vote had done what Thomas Mercer created it to do. It had slowed a room down long enough for people to see who would pay the price. One Friday afternoon, a month after the firing, Lily visited the office after school. Mrs. Alvarez brought her downtown because Ethan had a late governance meeting, and Lily wanted to see where the big file thing had happened. That was what she called it, because Ethan had spared her the uglier parts. She stepped off the elevator wearing a purple backpack and holding a drawing she had made in art class. Ethan met her near reception. "Is this where they were mean?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked down at her. "Some people made bad choices here." "Did they say sorry?" "Some did. Some are still learning what that means." Lily considered that with the seriousness of a child deciding whether adults were being honest. Then she took his hand. At Ethan's temporary office, she saw his restored badge lying on the desk beside a stack of policy drafts. She picked it up and turned it over. "This works now?" "Yes." She touched the photo clipped inside the plastic holder. "You look tired." I was. Under the side table, the cardboard box sat folded open. Ethan had meant to throw it away twice, and had not done it. The coffee mug with blue stars rested inside beside Lily's school photo, now back in its frame. The yellow envelope lay on a shelf above the desk, logged and stamped, because Evelyn had insisted that even an unopened envelope could tell part of a story. Lily crouched beside the box. "Why did you keep it?" Ethan thought about the 18th floor, the glass walls, the way people had looked down at their keyboards while Paul handed him the notice. He thought about the boardroom doors closing upstairs, and Evelyn's hand reaching for the file his father had warned him might someday matter. "So I remember what it felt like," he said. Lily looked worried. He knelt beside her. "Not because I want to stay angry. Because people with boxes in their hands still deserve respect." She nodded slowly, then put the mug upright as if that fixed something. The formal apology came the next week. It was not written by Marissa Vale. She resigned before the investigation concluded, and the board accepted her resignation without severance beyond what her contract required. Trevor Ladd also resigned after the outside firm found that his office knowingly withheld the founder file from full board review. Dana Klein was terminated for cause after the board determined finance materials had been altered in a way that concealed governance risk. Paul Brenner was removed from HR leadership, and the company hired outside counsel to review every termination connected to executive complaints over 4 years. The apology came from the independent board chair. It was read first to employees, not shareholders. The chair stood on the 18th floor operations floor, near the same glass conference room where Ethan had been fired. Employees gathered in the aisles and along the office walls. No one laughed this time. No one pretended not to listen. The chair stated that Ethan Mercer had been wrongfully terminated after attempting to place governing documents before the board. She stated that the company had failed to protect employees who raised records and reporting concerns. She stated that the board had rescinded the termination, corrected Ethan's personnel file, and opened a review for others harmed by similar conduct. Then she turned toward Ethan. He stood near the back, not in front. The cardboard box was not with him. He had left it under the side table upstairs. "Mr. Mercer," the chair said, "the board apologizes for the public nature of the harm and for the company's failure to honor the documents and the dignity involved." Ethan did not enjoy the attention. His face showed that. But he stepped forward because public harm cannot be fully repaired in private. "Thank you," he said. That was all he said. The shortness of it made people listen harder. Afterward, Isabel Ruiz found him near the elevators. She had come back to sign paperwork for her corrected review. "You named us," she said. "I named the pattern," Ethan answered. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. Same thing some days. Mark Ellison shook Ethan's hand with both of his. Priya Nair sent an email from her new company with 2 sentences. "I did not think they would ever admit it. Thank you for making them open the file." Ethan printed that email and placed it in the governance review binder, not as evidence against anyone, but as evidence for why the work mattered. By the end of the second month, the board-level reporting channel had received 11 submissions. Some were minor. 2 were serious. One prevented a vendor renewal from moving forward with incomplete safety documents. Another revealed that a department head had been discouraging staff from putting concerns in writing. Those issues were handled before anyone had to carry a box through the lobby. That was repair. Not perfection, not a speech. Repair was a working system that made cruelty harder to hide the next time. Ethan's life did not become glamorous. He still lived in the same apartment in Cicero. He still packed Lily's lunches before dawn. The inhaler still stayed in the drawer with the bills, though there were fewer past due notices now. He still rode the train, still wore the navy jacket, still corrected documents in a tone that let people keep their dignity when the mistake was honest. The difference was that the room had to hear him. And because the room had to hear him, it had to hear others too. Months later, when Hartwell Meridian issued its annual governance report, the founder file was referenced plainly for the first time in years. The report did not make Ethan a legend. It did not turn Thomas Mercer's old protections into a marketing slogan. It simply stated that the company's governing documents included founder class review rights for protected transactions, and that those rights had been reaffirmed after a records integrity review. Ethan preferred that. Records should not need drama to be honored. On the anniversary of Grace's death, Ethan took Lily to the small park near their apartment, where Grace used to sit with a book while Lily chased bubbles across the grass. Lily brought the coffee mug with blue stars because she wanted to use it for wildflowers. Ethan almost told her the mug belonged at the office, then stopped. Objects could change jobs. They filled it with dandelions and small white clover. Lily set it on the picnic table and leaned against him. "Mom would have liked that you fixed the company," she said. Ethan watched a train move along the tracks beyond the trees. "I helped fix part of it." "Because Grandpa made the file?" "Because Grandpa knew people sometimes forget what promises are for." Lily picked at the edge of a clover stem. "And because you called." Ethan smiled a little. "And because I called." The cardboard box remained under the side table in his office for a long time. Visitors sometimes noticed it and wondered why an interim director kept such a plain thing in a room with board binders and policy drafts. Ethan rarely explained unless they asked directly. When they did, he told them the truth. "That box was handed to me when people thought they could remove the question by removing the person who asked it." Then he would point to the certification page in the new board packet. "This is how we make sure that does not work again." The yellow envelope was eventually placed in the archive with a stamped cover sheet. It had never been opened by Marissa Vale. It had never been logged by Paul Brenner. It had never been reviewed by Trevor Ladd before the firing. Yet it became part of the official record because its rejection proved the culture around it. A sealed file proved Ethan's authority. An unopened envelope proved the company's contempt. A cardboard box proved the public cost. Together, those objects told the story more clearly than any executive statement could. Marissa's real mistake was not failing to recognize the man who controlled the deciding vote. That was serious, but it was not the deepest wrong. Her real mistake was believing that a man in a worn jacket, with a child to support and a cardboard box in his hands, could be treated as disposable because the room had been taught not to look closely. The boardroom was sealed because the documents demanded it. The dignity had to be restored because the humiliation had been public. Every workplace has people who carry more than others can see. A lunch packed before sunrise. A medical bill folded into a drawer. A promise to a spouse who is gone. A question asked carefully because the truth matters and the paycheck does too. Those people deserve respect before anyone knows what they own, who their parents were, or what authority their signature carries. A title can open a door. A file can prove a vote. But basic dignity should never have to wait for a sealed folder to be read aloud. For more stories about dignity, respect, and the truth that waits beneath appearances, stay with Quiet Justice Stories.